Howdy, folks. Happy Friday. Gee, I wonder what we're going to talk about today. There's nothing going on in the NHL right now. No, right? We'll start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
Well, I guess we have to talk about the whole Otani thing. There's you have the money laundering, stealing case where, his interpreter allegedly stole 16 million now, not just 4 million. Now it's 16 million. And then you have the home run ball issue where the Dodgers it's on video. They separated a woman who speaks Spanish and English, and they tried to strong arm her for the ball, and they kept her separated from her mate, and that was a whole debacle. And then apparently Otani hinted that he spoke to this woman and took a picture with her after the game, which he did not do. And between those two things, they made a strong case on First Take, and they do make a strong case that it's hard to believe this stuff. And I looked up the law, and Mike, you remembered it, where after $10,000, the IRS starts looking into wire transactions. And so how could you possibly wire 16 million without actually getting hold of the guy who owns the account at some point? Right. It just seems far-fetched.
Yeah, and I don't want to be sued.
No.
And I'm not going to say anything that would get me sued other than something stinks here. I don't know what it is. Something doesn't add up. They're talking about a deal being cut for this guy that he's going to, because of $16 million that he's going to federal prison. But it sounds like he's cut a deal that he's going to, get less time. Right. And it's probably going to be in Club Fed. It's not going to be in some, maximum security place. So I don't know. I mean, could this guy be a fall guy? I don't know. All I know is that in baseball history, and I know I brought this up many a time with Russ, but in baseball history, after the Black Sox scandal, and watch 8 Men Out, or
read about it.
Elliot Asanoff had a great book called 8 Men Out about the Black Sox scandal.
All Ray Liotta, well, you can't, but
geez.
Called John Cusack.
Yeah, there you go. Buck Weaver's still looking to play some games. DB Sweeney. No, a few years after the Black Sox scandal, after Kennesaw Mountain Landis purportedly cleaned up the game, there was a scandal involving Ty Cobb and Tris Speaker throwing games. Landis said he had cleaned up the game, so the last thing he had wanted to do was the gambling thing coming up again, because then nobody would believe baseball was on the up and up, and he buried it. What he did was Cobb was in Detroit. He was traded to Philadelphia. Tris Speaker was in Boston. He was traded to Philadelphia. They ended up being on the bench for the Philadelphia A's teams that won world championships in, I think it was 29 and 30. But they were, the reputations didn't get killed, but they did not have the power position that they were in with their respective teams. And I'm just saying right now, this smacks to me of baseball trying to cover up their biggest star. I don't know if it's true. I'm not saying it's true, but something smells here, and they're trying to bury it.
Yeah, I think most people are need to see more, hear more, but this is like it. I will say this: it seems like baseball people will go to great lengths to protect it.
Yeah, and there are enough intrepid reporters out there that will.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. The reporters are truly trying to protect the sport, and it's not your job.
No,
your job is not to do that.
Right, because that would affect their job. But I think there are
but that's not the point.
But I think there are other reporters out there that are digging into this.
And LA Times. No, there's some good things going on out there, but it's not over. So we'll see what happens with it. But this is a big scandal for baseball that right now hasn't really gone to fruition yet. I don't know. We'll see what Kevin thinks about it.
Kev, we just wanted to we're doing the pre-show. We just wanted to touch on your feelings on the whole Otani situation. I basically said right now, something is not kosher in Denmark. It really, I mean, I don't know what it is, but it doesn't really add up that like $16 million flows out of his accounts by this interpreter. He's cutting a deal with the feds for probably a lighter prison term. and that Otani wasn't involved. I don't know whether he was involved or not, but something does not add up.
Well, that's what it looks like from the outside looking in. Although I did see Harold Reynolds, who said he spent a lot of time around Otani, and he said that the relationship between him and his interpreter was far different than anything he'd ever seen. Like he said, he was the guy that drove him to all of his, appointments when he had his injury. When he had a bullpen session, he was always holding the radar gun. They were close friends, and although that doesn't explain, like I'm pretty
the
sure
wire transfer part is the part we're having trouble with, because there's a law that says anything over 10 grand, the IRS starts looking into you and starts getting involved, and that law apparently is still on the books. So how could he have never been contacted?
They don't check if you make a deposit. It's just it's just on their radar. Like they get notification of it. So
right.
Like,
so don't you think there were enough of these? There were 19,000 transactions.
So yeah, but I mean, as long as what you're saying is that if they didn't appear on his income taxes, then they would have called him. So
right.
So
but the perception out there is that, oh my God, I didn't know about that. I mean, honestly, okay. Yeah. We know that there have been celebrities like Billy Joel got milked of millions of dollars by his manager. There have been, boxers who had their entourages and musicians with their managers. It's not impossible that money just evaporates.
No, for sure.
But, I mean, is it possible? Yeah. Sure.
Do you think though? I mean, it occurred to me just in the last 10 years or so that it's flipped. It used to be that celebrities always got a break, and now I think it's the other way around. Like, I think if I'll just use this as an example, Martha Stewart went to jail for something that I think if Russ did it, he wouldn't have served any jail time.
Right.
That's just my
right. You're right about that.
I think it's going the other way. So my take on this would be when the feds came out and announced all this, if they had any inkling that Otani was involved, I think they'd have been all over him.
Although I would have snitched on Russ so to make him sure he would go to prison. Yeah. But
yeah, we'll say it like this though, because Mike pointed out another thing that happened with baseball. It seems like this country and the reporters are doing it, and it does seem like people will do anything they can to protect baseball. It does seem that way.
I don't know about that. I would argue that. I mean, it is a sport that there's a romance with it, but I don't think we're in the type of political environment where anybody gives anybody a break if they catch them in a compromising position. So,
but the cherry on top of the sundae, and then we'll move on because we got a lot to talk about. Apparently, however, how many hundreds or thousands of bets that the interpreter made, zero were on baseball. So you're telling me you're telling me a compulsive gambler who works in baseball, who has access to injury reports and all this stuff, the one thing he's not going to do is bet on baseball? That's again, something is not something.
Yeah, we'll see. There's stuff. I also brought up the Otani home run ball situation. I don't know if you heard about that, Kev. If you didn't, then we'll just move on. But
no, I haven't heard about it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's fine. We'll move on.
Okay. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, April 12th, 2024.
I'm Russ Cohen, and it's nice to see someone got the date right.
I'm Kevin Allen from Detroit Hockey Now.
And I'm Michael Lagello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Okay, we have to start here. It started on Wednesday. Honestly, on Tuesday, and I had no prior knowledge of anything that was going on. But there was starting to be a lot of chatter about Arizona. We had heard about the auction. We had heard the auction was going to happen in June. And Kev, when we heard the auction was in June, and then Bill Daly came out and said that would probably be too late to move the team for next year. And then the ownership in Arizona came out and said, well, if we get if we win the auction, it's going to take us 3 years to build the building, and that meant 3 years in mullet. Things seemed to decompensate very quickly, and now it seems like we're on the momentum is building to the point that the Elliot Friedman report said that on April 18th, after the season, there'll be an announcement that the team is going to be moved to Salt Lake. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, well, we had talked about this. I'd been a long supporter of the idea of trying to figure out how to make it work in Arizona, because I really thought they never had the combination of a good team and a perfect arena situation to see if it actually would work. But it had gotten to the point of ridiculously, and and it seemed like that's the way to go. Although, I thought that the big holdup is I think the NHL wanted to save Salt Lake. But this is what I was told just recently. What they've decided is there's so many people that want an NHL franchise that they'll get their money, and you can pretty much expect we're going to go to 34 teams,
right?
Without too long. So they just figured they'll get their big price anyway, and they'll have to figure out how to sort this out. How much is he going to pay for the franchise? How's it going to work? And but this goes to what I've said before. You need enough time to put something in place that you can get it up and running. And I saw there was someone excerpted a little interview done with the owner who said, when it was asking about the name, he just said, well, we want something that's going to create some momentum, which told me, he certainly understands how this all works. And so who is the owner? Is it the Jazz?
Ryan Smith, the Utah Jazz
owner. Yeah. Well, I mean, that is the other element here that I wanted to bring up, is the fact that he has stuff already in place.
Yes.
So he can, make this work, and it's not going to be, quite the issue it would be as if they moved and were trying to establish a team and, in a place where they didn't have ticket people already in place, and management concessions already worked out and all that kind of stuff. So this should be a pretty smooth situation.
And anything can happen, and with Morello and Gutierrez, anything is possible. But just to answer Thomas's question, the Jazz play in the Delta Center in Salt Lake City. I think that Smith, I heard an interview with him, said that for hockey it would hold, I think, 13,500 or 14,000. That's not a permanent situation. They're making a bid for the 2032 Olympics, and if that happens, they're going to build a new building for the Jazz and for the prospective hockey team. Smith is part owners, I think, with an MLS team with one of the co-owners of the Devils. So there is a connection there. He's very, very sharp, very young. The NHL likes the fact that he's an owner of an NBA team, so he's been vetted. It's not something like a John Spano or the Tim Balsley situation. Geographically, it works, Russ. What seemed to get the ball rolling was the Frank Cervalli report that they were making dual schedules, and as soon as that came out, then you knew something was serious in terms of this.
Yeah, that was more of I think this is happening. But if you remember, we talked about a month or two ago, because my eyebrow got raised when that other Atlanta deal was like, hey, we pretty much have an arena agreed to already, and we've got a place. And Kevin was on, I think, that episode, and we were talking about where it might be and what. And at that point, I was feeling like what Kevin just said. Like, I remember we even said, hey, there's all these people that want NHL franchises, but they got to figure out Arizona. And I think they just did look at it and said, we're tired of playing the long game here, because June 27th is the bid. I mean, it's like it's just too late, right? And so I do think that really moved it up. Now, I think they're still going to buy the land, and I think they're going to still try and develop a team in Arizona, and maybe in 3-4 years we're going to be talking about it.
Right.
But maybe it'll be longer. It might take longer. Who knows? So I think this is smart for the NHL. I think Salt Lake is good.
Mhm.
I think Atlanta is definitely going to get their team. And then the other one will be up for grabs. Like Houston seems to be coming back into the forefront, Kev, as far as a willingness. So who knows?
Well, this
Yeah.
is go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Ken.
Well, I was just going to add, I wonder too, and maybe this will come out, maybe it won't, is what kind of an agreement was made with the current Coyotes owners in terms of coming back into the league.
Right.
Because I'm sure if I'm own that and say, look, if I'm coming back in the league, you're not charging me $2 billion.
Right.
Like, if I'm going along with this and being cooperative and, selling at the price you want me to sell it at. Because, if he's looking around, he's probably saying, I don't want the bottom dollar on this. I want to be paid because this is a valuable franchise,
Right.
So I'm sure, I wonder if there'll be some sort of handshake agreement or even in writing that says that the Arizona can come back in at some point and won't, have to pay an astronomical expansion fee if they do get an arena built and so forth. It'll be interesting to see, what comes out on that, because if I was the owner of the Coyotes, that's what I would be insisting on.
Well, you're right. This is the key in terms of it coming back to Arizona. But this is what I heard Elliot Friedman talk about earlier today on him and his and Jeff Merrick's podcast. Now, not from Elliot, but previous to that, I had heard that the amount was $1.2 billion, $1 billion to Morello for the franchise, and the $200 billion going to the other owners as sort of like a transfer fee. That's not. Now that's I've heard that. That's not definitive. What is interesting is that there probably would be some sort of right of first refusal that Morello would have, a window, you say 3 years, 5 years, whatever, in terms of they bring a franchise back to Arizona. He's got the right to be the guy who. Okay. But the speculation is, and the stuff that has come out today about them not paying their bills, about how they've lied to the general manager, to the staff of the team, to the players in terms of, we're making an auction, we're going to stay in Arizona. People are pissed. I mean, Friedman didn't name who, but I'm assuming he is talking to people in the organization. They feel misled. And if this is the type of thing that they can make all the promises in the world that they want, but if that's the way he operates, that's the last guy I want to give a franchise and give a ticket back into the league for.
I'll tell you, though, that's the first I had heard the actual money. And the fact that you're telling me that Morello is getting $1 billion explains everything to me. Because before he was resistant. So I'm sure that somehow the league has worked this out. I mean, he wanted to keep his franchise.
Right.
He wanted to stay in Arizona.
Right.
But if the league came in and said, look, we need to get this deal done. Well, if you're going to give him $1 billion on this franchise, right. I mean, it's an offer he can't refuse. So I like, if he tells me that, I fully intended to stay here, right. I would believe him. For $1 billion, because we all know what he paid for that. It was far less than that. And, before, when people were talking about that, they wanted to pay what he paid for it, a little more than that, not what the franchise is worth now. So, I could see that, money talks.
Well, in completely different situations, and I'm not trying to cast aspersions on Morello in terms of this comparison, but if you remember, Donald Sterling in the NBA with the LA Clippers, he got overpaid by, I think, double by the owner that bought the Clippers from him.
Yeah.
Daniel Snyder got overpaid for the Washington Commanders, Redskins, whatever you want to call them. So this is a situation where, Morello may have said, give me $1 billion, not thinking that they would say, okay, anybody would match the price. And then they matched it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the easiest way to get out of it.
I've said for a long time that people will always, when they talk about these situations, they always say things like, well, just make them sell. It's not that easy. Like they own the property and, the team, they have rights. I mean, you've got to get some cooperation on this, and in order to do it, sometimes you got to pay, and to get out from under all these issues. But And if you're the league, you like the fact that this, even a bottom level franchise, which is right now playing in a tiny arena, you still got $1 billion for it. So
Right.
you like that in terms of the value of your franchises.
Kev, what about now? There's some things on Twitter we don't all know because we're not having our noses buried in the CBA every day. But as far as personnel, so as an example, like Clayton Keller, his no trade kicks in next season. What if he goes to his agent and he puts Salt Lake on there? Like,
yeah,
could he force himself out of there as a result? And could this happen with other players?
Yeah, I don't think so, but
Okay.
but we'll see. Because I think this has been discussed before, like it rang a bell. But this is a thing that I think could will get worked out between the Players Association and the NHL. But I don't see that happening. There'd be too much chaos.
From what I heard, Russ, these players are contracted to the franchise.
Correct.
So if they're contracted to the franchise, they can't block going to Salt Lake from Arizona. But if they have no trade or no move restrictions, then they have some control about saying, well, I really don't want to go.
Right. That's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering if that can be fought. Like he's the only one that came to mind that because he wasn't happy there anyhow.
Yeah.
And he knew that
his dad wasn't happy there.
His dad wasn't happy, right? That's true. But as you know, if your dad's not happy, you're not happy. So
no, that's
too friggin' hot.
Yeah. But I forgot the point I was going to make now about I've lost it over that.
But I'll just say this while you're thinking about it, Kev. If you look at it right now, if this happens and they move to Salt Lake, and then you put the areas where two expansion teams would go in terms of where they are, in terms of having a building and in terms of having everything lined up. Houston and Atlanta currently are in front of Arizona. Arizona doesn't have an NHL building. They're not going back to Gila River or where the Suns play. Houston's got the where the Rockets play. Atlanta's building a building. They're ahead of them.
Yeah, no doubt of that. I mean, to be honest with you, the only thing that Houston was lacking is enthusiasm for the project.
Right.
He did. The owner of the Rockets is not like the owner of the Jazz, who was excited about this process. So what I heard is the NHL is a little less excited about going to Houston, who just really wanted a second tenant, for his building. So it'll be interesting to see, because Houston would be an ideal market. I mean, a natural rival for Dallas. There's just a lot to like about that. A large city in terms of your television audience as well. So this could, for all the years that they've put up with the controversy and the aggravation of Arizona, they could end up out of this, very, very excited about how this is going to turn out, because I suspect, and I could be wrong, but I suspect that the Salt Lake franchise is going to be like Vegas and Seattle, where because they're kind of starved for pro teams there. So you could end up having an instant sensation, sold out in what is it, 24 minutes? What's the record? 15 minutes? 20?
It was quick.
And the way Armstrong has crafted that roster, they have a ton of draft picks, they have a ton of cap space, you have a new owner who's probably going to want to go out and spend. I mean, they could turn that thing around pretty quickly. I have some ideas in terms of players on the two teams that I cover that could, if they decided they want to go in a direction of trading players out, that a Utah franchise would be something that would be a destination, a favorable destination. But anyway, we'll get off that because we'll see where that starts to how that story continues to evolve over the next few days. I just know that Elliot Friedman said the 18th of April, which is next Thursday, I believe. It was the day that potentially there would be an announcement, and we'll see. But Kev, we have to start with after that with the race in the East for that final playoff spot because it's nuts.
I mean, nobody wants it. No one. Maybe you can make a case that the Penguins want it. Absolutely, you know, they're getting a, what's a 10-game point streak or whatever it is. But they're it's all I could think of watching the Penguins and the Red Wings last night was, the famed lead on Don Larson pitching the perfect game, where he said the imperfect man pitched the perfect game. Those were two imperfect teams that played an incredibly entertaining hockey game.
Right.
All because the game was rife with mistakes, lots of dangerous scoring chances. Goalies couldn't come up with the big save at the opportune time. So
Chris Osgood was. I watched the overtime, and he was very pointed after the overtime. Like, hey, you should. Nedeljkovic should have covered that puck. What's he doing? Why did he?
Yeah. No. I mean, and they gave up Alex Lyon, the Lion.
I'm sorry, Alex Lyon. He's playing Nedeljkovic.
Alex Lyon, the Lion King, as he's known in Detroit. He gives up a goal, a shorthanded goal on a save he's got to make. Harry Sinden, when I started out as a hockey writer in the 80s, told me, I hate it when the coach says, well, you can't blame the goalie. We gave up a breakaway. Well, I can blame the goalie. I don't pay him to make routine saves. I pay him to stop breakaways and to do all that. And, he gave him one of those. Now, I thought Nedeljkovic, was fine, but he didn't come up with any huge saves either. Both of them did okay, but okay is not good enough at this time.
Right.
But I was impressed with Crosby. Crosby was.
He's been unbelievable. But this is the thing that's bizarre because we've got 5 teams in a race: the Islanders, the Penguins, the Capitals, the Red Wings, the Flyers. Every single one of them is playing the goaltender who was perceived to be a backup. Alex Lyon for Detroit, Urson for Philadelphia, and in different circumstances because Carter Hart, Urson for Philadelphia, Charlie Lindgren for Washington, Nedeljkovic, and Varlamov. Every single one of them. Now, does this mean all
I
of
would keep Varlamov in a separate group, though. I would. Because
but he was the backup to Sorokin.
But he also has the favor of the coach who, wanted Jack Adams with him in net. So I think he was going to give him a chance more than these other goalies were going to get a chance.
Yeah, but it's one of those cases where, both can be right on this.
Yes.
I mean,
So,
it's certainly true that Varlamov's guy, but Mike's absolutely right. I mean, it's been a strange year, and the goaltending in that conference has really been weird all season long. First of all, Vasilevsky hasn't been Vasilevsky-like at all times. The Bruins have a rotation going with the guy that won the Vezina Trophy last year. I mean, they could continue that. Like, they haven't ruled it out yet.
Shesterkin was a disappearing act until about the All-Star break, and then and Quick was playing better, playing like a number one. Ilya Samsonov in Toronto was waived because he had a broken psyche, and now in the last 21 games he's 22 games he's 17-4-1. Yeah, it's nuts. I can't even think of one team. Bobrovsky. Bobrovsky has been probably the most stable goaltender in the Eastern Conference. He's been they've gotten good play out of Stolarz as the backup, but Bobrovsky's been pretty solid from stem to turn.
He has been, although when the Red Wings played Florida recently, I looked at his numbers of the 5 previous games, and he had given up 3 or more goals in all 6 of the games. So,
right.
And that just could mean that the Florida Panthers, which was certainly the case because they were struggling, may not have played as sound defensively as they had been playing. However, it also says that he couldn't come up with the the huge save when they needed it, most either. So I think everyone has had that. And I was asked a really interesting question that I would love to get you two guys to weigh in on a Pittsburgh radio show this morning, where they asked me if I thought. Now I've lost my train of thought again for the second time today.
Is it Hart Trophy question? Maybe.
No.
You'll think of it. While I talk, you'll think of it.
Yeah.
Russ, I mean, you would think that the Islanders are home and cooled out in third place right now with 89 points. They're 4 points ahead of the three teams that are out on the outside looking in, 3 points ahead of the Penguins. But Dobson got hurt in the game against the Canadiens, and we know that he's their number one defenseman. He's the one who logs the most ice time. I mean, I think they're safe going into the final weekend of the season, but if you lose Dobson and he doesn't play the last 3 games, that might hurt them.
Yeah, I think they need to win 2 if they really want to guarantee themselves. Now, if they all of a sudden don't play Dobson in that Ranger game, which is guaranteed to have a brawl, that might be the better move anyhow.
Right.
But yeah, I still have a feeling they're getting in because they have guys that have legitimately gotten hot, and they have a hot goalie in Varlamov, and the coach believes in him. Like, that's why I don't think Philly's getting in, because they beat the Rangers, sure, but nobody's hot on that team. Noah Cates is on a 5-game point streak. That's not the same as what Palmieri's doing, or Crosby, or anybody else, or same as the goaltending. And so I think, even though that looks bad, I think they're still going to be able to pull through because they really have banded together. I see a different Bo Horvat this year than I did last year.
Right.
Especially in yesterday's game, I thought Bo Horvat was really, really good. So yeah, I think they'll still be okay. It's funny because, we all counted the Penguins dead, like we all did, and I even said on Sirius the other day, I think we have to kind of apologize to the Penguins because they've gotten back into this, and they've gotten back into it in the most spectacular fashion of any of the teams because they don't have any losses, and so it's like, yeah, Jelkovic, for some reason, he was decent, like you said, in Detroit, Kev, but now maybe it's just all they needed was somebody to believe in, and then the rest kicked in because now Erik Karlsson looks like Erik Karlsson, and that's what makes, everybody's so worried about who teams are playing. Like, well, they have this team on the schedule and that one on the schedule, and it's like, you get down to the last 2 or 3 games, like a lot of that doesn't matter anymore. It just matters who's got the will to actually win.
Yeah.
I remembered the question they asked me, and I do want to get you guys to weigh in on this because I think it's a fun question. They asked me, if you look at the Eastern Conference, it looks like the haves and the have-nots.
Sure.
You got the teams at the top, Boston, Carolina, and so forth, and the teams at the bottom that are scrambling, trying to get in. And they asked me whether or not I thought that there really is truly a large gap. And my answer, I surprised myself by saying this because I don't believe that, actually. I think the teams at the top of the Eastern are not invincible. I think far.
No, they're not invincible. None of them.
Yeah, and historically in our sport, we do allow and see often that teams that are lower seeded win in playoff series, and I think this season will be no exception. Somebody's going to fall in the season. So
I was going to say my feeling is. And I felt this way about the Rangers and even Carolina. While they're good teams, they're very good teams. Mm-hmm. Any of them could get to the cup. But I just feel like in the past, and maybe this is 5 years ago, it seemed like it was harder to get 100 points in this league. But if you're a pretty good team and you have really good goaltending, these teams get 100 and 110 points. And they're not like these super teams like they used to be. And I have to agree with you on that.
Well, okay, I'll put it this way. If you have whoever wins the Metro and whoever wins the Atlantic, and those teams, the way things are currently constructed right now, could play a pair of teams that have won 5 Stanley Cups over the last 15 years. And the core groups of those teams, Tampa Bay and Pittsburgh, are still there. There's championship pedigree there. You think that the Boston Bruins and the New York Rangers want to play Pittsburgh and Tampa Bay? No. Not a friggin' chance.
Nope. No, I agree with you.
Yeah. Now, if Washington, as flawed as they are, or Detroit or Philadelphia sneak into that second wild card, then whoever wins the top seed in the East, not to say they're going to have an easy time, but they'll have an easier time. But I don't want to face Sidney Crosby the way that the Penguins are playing right now. I don't want to face Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's been on a run since the deadline. They got Dumba and they got Duclair for absolutely nothing. And they got Michael Bunting, who's playing as good, almost as good as Jake Gensel is in Carolina. So, right.
Not quite that good, but yes, he is playing well.
Right. Yeah. He's got 13 or 14 points. I think Gensel's got like 20, but Bunting was supposedly the salary dump, and he's actually playing well for them. So,
I mean, Dubas took a hit on that in Pittsburgh. The fan base did not like that aspect of the trade, and it's really worked out. It's really re-energized, in my opinion, Malkin. Malkin seemed to be
he's the one that's playing a lot better. Yeah.
Yeah, in the mud. And the one thing about Pittsburgh, and I picked Pittsburgh to win this mini rat tail pool that we have to get into the playoffs because they were playing so well. But saying all that, I wasn't exaggerating when I said they are really a flawed team. Even though they keep winning, they give up so many scoring chances. It's really unbelievable. It's fun. It's entertaining. It's like watching hockey in the 80s again, because they're mistakes. I mean, that's what we miss from the 80s, our defensive mistakes. And you see them with the Penguins. You see them with the Red Wings, with the Washington Capitals. I watched them recently. And the Washington, how many goals did Washington get last night?
Oh, they only had 2. It was 4.
So they've now gone 7 games without scoring more than 2 goals. This is a team with Alex Ovechkin on their team.
Yeah, and you know what, Kev? They were comatose. They were losing 2-0 late in the second. Connor McMichael got a goal to make it 2-1, and I'm thinking, okay, they've been outplayed in this game, and they're gonna, they need this game. They're gonna show up in the third period, and they did not show up. It was really a bad performance by the Capitals. No, the result I was surprised with, Russ, was Philadelphia winning yesterday, because I thought that they were basically, they're still in it, but it's tough to pull out of this crash dive that they've been in and think that they're, with 2 games left, that they're going to be able to get into that last spot.
Right. Well, the thing is, I've heard things where, there was some talking going on with management and otherwise to players. And I think they conjured it up that, hey, they knew this was their last game, give their best effort. And I think they gave their best effort and the Rangers didn't. And I think that was a help. But they won the game, clear and outright. I think the issue is, it's like anything else. They don't have enough games.
Right.
It really doesn't matter. They don't control their own destiny. They don't have enough games. It's the worst situation to be in, because now you're just hoping that Pittsburgh loses 2 out of 3, and you're hoping that the Islanders lose 2 out of 3. You're hoping that Detroit doesn't pick up any more points. And there's another 3-point game that's going to be played next week before the Flyers play their own with Washington, unless that doesn't mean anything. And those 3-point games are death to that team that doesn't have that extra game.
Yeah, and Kev, you brought up the fact that Austin Matthews scored 2 goals last night. He's at 68, and the Leafs are playing their home finale tomorrow with a chance for Matthews to score 69 and 70, and it's against the Red Wings. And those teams hate each other. They do not like. Dylan Larkin when he scores a goal against Toronto, it seems like he's won a Stanley Cup, because he just loves playing the Leafs. So
just so people understand, his family, his dad, they're from Toronto,
right?
So that he has, even though he's an American,
right?
He certainly has understanding.
Oh, I'm just doing a request here from Andrew to hold up the sign. I'll be doing that a lot more next week when we get close to elimination. But okay, just to touch on a couple things in the East. Now I want to swing to the West before we end the show. Right now, Boston and Florida are 1 point apart. And that's going to mean something in terms of matchups, obviously. Right now it looks like Florida, Toronto, but if Florida pulls ahead of Boston, then it would be Boston, Toronto. Toronto is pretty much relegated to third place in the Atlantic after losing to New Jersey. Right now, it looks like it's going to be Carolina and the Islanders in the first round, and then the Rangers would play either Tampa or probably Pittsburgh in the first round. Russ, I mean, I think the Rangers should win that series. They've beaten Pittsburgh before. They beat them with Louis Domingue in goal instead of Alex Nedeljkovic or Jari. But still, that's a tough first round.
I mean, listen, you got Letang and Carlson. That's enough to deal with. And you got Crosby and Malkin. Rust is hard to deal with. I think they could win that series. I'll go back to when, they had Lundqvist and they had never beaten Pittsburgh. And, they finally did go into Pittsburgh and beat them. Mm-hmm. And that was hard to do. And I think it will be the same thing. It's the same group. It's just a different goalie. And Shesterkin will be just as hard. And I think it will be hard to do. But I think they'll do it because they have some options now on defense. They don't have to keep Gustafsson in there if they don't want to. And I think ultimately that may get changed. The one thing I'll say is I understand that Filipino was playing in a regular jersey again. The last time he did that, he had a setback. And so, honestly, I don't want to see Filipino in a regular jersey. I don't think he should play at all this year for his long-term health. I understand that the Rangers are trying him out. I think Ranger fans need to kind of cool it on that because I don't think you want this guy in there anywhere in the first round. It's just the injuries are too close together. Like it's just,
I thought they ruled him out for the season.
Well, apparently they didn't, Mike. And so it's it's a little bit worrisome. And I don't blame the organization, except I think the organization sometimes, all of them, because these players are always raring to go. Like they want to go, they want to play, and sometimes you have to hold them back. And I think this is one of those situations.
Okay,
but
so
don't forget according to CBA, they have the right to seek an outside medical opinion.
Sure,
which some of them do. So
okay, swinging to the West. And I said and prophetically that the team that would win the Central Division would have an easier path because they would want to avoid that 2-3 matchup because the 2-3 matchup in the Central would be, say Dallas wins the division, there would be Winnipeg, Colorado, and Winnipeg, Colorado would beat on each other, and the winner of that series would be in a much worse shape when they play the winner of the division. Well, genius that I am, the Dallas Stars are in first place in the Central, and they would currently would play the second wild card. And lo and behold, Kev, right now the second wild card is the Vegas Golden Knights, the Stanley Cup champions. And we get the news today that, oh my God, he must have come back from Lourdes because Mark Stone is skating.
Yep. Yeah, I think he's been cleared to practice. It sounds to me like the anticipation is he'll be back. And they can clinch, by the way, tonight. It would require a St. Louis loss and then a win. 3 points swing won't do it because of the tiebreaker. But if there's a double loss for St. Louis in regulation and Vegas wins in regulation, they would clinch that spot. And it's going to happen because they've got 3 games left. So.
Yeah, it just seems like it was etched in stone that he was going to be back in time. Like, I know it was a real injury. We all get that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. So, like, I have had this conversation with he goes, I know some of my colleagues, it's GM who told me, I know some of my colleagues are upset at this, but I'm not upset about it. I mean, that's just the way the rules are. Like, like what's, so. If we don't like it, you can change the rules next CBA.
Right. And the problem is
this is the funny thing, Kev.
The PA doesn't want to change it.
Just like the college free agent rule, just like this one, most of the time they don't want it because at some point it's going to benefit them too.
Yeah.
For sure. That's exactly right, Russ. They don't want to change it. So, I mean, or else they would. I mean, some of them do complain about it because they don't like facing a team that, technically has a $99 million payroll. Right. And that's just like, with the signing yesterday of Hannafin for Vegas, another $7 $7.35 million player. That's 8, I think, if I'm counting correctly, 8 players of $5 million or more, 5 players that are close to $40 million. But people say, well, that means they can't keep Marchessault. Not necessarily. I mean, like if they could make a trade and bring in some long-term IR dollars, I mean, it's certainly possible. If you're willing to spend money, and the owner of the Vegas Golden Knights is willing to spend money, and you can afford to pay off all these contracts of these guys sitting out and, you know, earning dollars not to play, you know, you can get advantage. So, and to think, remember when all that they were worried about under the CBA is the advantage that teams have because there was no salary cap on how much you could pay your medical staff, your trainers, so they could get the top trainers, they could get the
unlimited front office.
Unlimited. Yeah. So you could do all that. That's what they were worried about. The advantages, you know, no one talked about. I remember when this CBA, no one was saying that when the salary cap was brought in. Well, somebody's going to end up with, you know, $15 to $18 million on long-term IR. You know, no one thought this would be the case, but you know, these are the rules, and
other teams can do it, so they should do it.
And some do it. Yeah. Some do it.
Yeah,
I mean, the Tampa Bay Lightning have done it.
Right. So. What this tells me with Vegas is that Alec Martinez is probably not going to be back. He's 36 years old. He's making over $5 million. You know, they made, you know, Marchessault as a UFA. They probably would like to bring him back, but you know, they traded Riley Smith last year. We were in line at the draft in Nashville when we found out that Riley Smith had been traded to Pittsburgh. So, you know, I mean, I think they'd probably like to keep him, but as you knew, as soon as Hanifin got traded to Vegas, he was never leaving. It was like a cult. It was like a cult. He's never getting out the door. He's never going.
And Vegas has become, you know, it used to be like, you know, everybody wanted to go to New York or everybody wanted to go. Now, like players want
Pittsburgh for a while.
Yeah, that's right. Now players want to go to Vegas. They want to live there. Yeah, so it's
no state tax. I mean, again, unless the NHL changes the rule, which I don't know how they could. Nashville, Vegas, Dallas, Tampa Bay, and Florida. Those 5 teams, and I'm probably missing one more, those no-tax states have a distinct advantage in terms of drawing players.
They do, but I will say this. Of all those teams you named, the only one that's really had the most advantage with it is Tampa, and that's really just because they've been able to keep the great players that they've drafted more so than some other teams, but you still had to draft those great players.
But
they didn't have to get rid of them.
It's changed over the last couple of years because Florida under Zito has learned to use the Tampa system. He gets Tkachuk. And now they overpaid on Bobrovsky. There's nothing he could have done about that. But Vegas is doing it, and Dallas is a different thing because they've developed and drafted their own players, but they're able to, you know, still have Jamie Benn and Sagan making over $9 million and be secondary players.
Hey, look, every Canadian who's 35 and over wants to play for the Leafs. They have that advantage.
Yeah, but they get penalized. They get penalized for the signing bonuses. The Canadian government's going to make it even worse for the.
That hasn't happened yet, though.
It's right now. It's still being adjudicated, Russ. But if it's decided that you're going to have players exiting Canada in droves because that's one thing that they have an advantage. Teams like Edmonton and those big contracts, the Matthews and McDavid, they're all heavily signing bonus laden, and that's one of the few advantages they have because the taxes up there are ridiculous. So I mean
Kev, you've lived longer than us, so I'm going to have to ask you this question. That's
a nice way to say you're older than us, Kev.
Haven't these governments been doing this for years anyhow? Even going back to like the old boxers, anybody who made a lot of money, it's not like it's anything new, really.
No, and for sure. I mean, I remember when it was a big story when cities started, making sure they get their fair share, in city taxes and all that. I remember writing a story about that. That caused one thing I do want to bring up.
right? That was some of the big baseball contracts.
Yeah, it does, but it impacted the hockey players as well, because some of them were going in pretty major cities, and cities were scrambling for revenue, so they basically instructed their finance office to make sure just to get the MLB, the NHL, NBA schedules, and just start sending out tax bills to looking at their contracts and sending out saying, look, this is what you owe for coming into our city to play.
Right.
And that irritated. But I did want to bring up, I did talk one time to, and I don't want to name him because he might be irritated by this, but he did tell me that he goes, yeah, I know that it's a big deal, the whole non-tax, but he goes, you know how many times that I've actually talked about that in my life, even though he played in Tampa? He said one time. Wow. He said it never occurred to me about it, and my agent brought it up and said, the other advantage if you go there is you're going to get, that's a no tax state. And I shrugged and I thought, well, I wanted to come here anyway. I said, so that's really a good deal. But he said it really was not a factor in my decision, even though at the end, when they told me that, I was quite pleased about it. So anyway, for whatever it's worth, when you're making, I guess my only point is when you're making that kind of money, that's for your accountant and for your agent to worry about. And it's probably less for what, they're more interested in the fact that they can golf their year round on their off days than that kind of money. Before we go, I wanted to bring this up, and I don't have all the information, but I know Russ will be very interested in this. And it's something that I've talked about before on this show, and it was really prompted by a guy that wrote a really fascinating paper about the baseball draft and about how, the media's gotten it all wrong by judging, trades based on, the prospects they get. And if you don't get he says, because it's impossible to know, with an 18-year-old draft, and his basic take was nobody gets no one. If you get somebody, you've been lucky. So anyway, with all that in mind, I've started looking at the draft, and in Detroit, where I am a beat writer, they haven't done well in the second round. So they have a second rounder, Jonathan Bergman, who hasn't been called up, wasn't called up very often this year. And some of the fans were disappointed. He's had an incredible year in the AHL. So I started to look up at Bergman as a 2018, and I started to look at second rounds. And it is absolutely startling to me that the number of successful second round picks, going back, is far less than I even had managed. And, as I've looked through this, and there's no rhyme or reason. There'd be a second rounder that made it who was the third pick in the second round, and then one more in the 18. There's been teams that are known for good scouting, teams that are known for bad scouting. Right. Like they get picks. I mean, it's almost like you get outside a 15th pick in the first round, you are just throwing darts. That's what it seems like.
Russ, you'd know the percentage that, but Shane Malloy, who he's basically says the percentage. I think it's like in the 30.
It's like 30.
Yeah, 30% range of players who were drafted in the second round play. I think it was 200 games in the NHL, yes. And I mean that's unbelievable because you would think that these teams. I mean, look at the percentages of second round picks in the NFL and now the rosters are much bigger, and these players play 3-4 years of college football, but still the success rate of players in the NFL in terms of being drafted in the second round and the NHL, they're vastly different.
It's a crapshoot. The only thing I would say is that I've noticed what some of the teams do, and maybe some of the good ones, is a lot of times, and this is just something that's been more so the last 10 years, if that second pick is your first pick, like your first round pick, those GMs tend to go pretty safe on those picks because they've got to have some guys stick, and they already without a first rounder. And I went back and looked at who I felt like were safe picks for some of those teams that did that. I bet you that's a little bit. I bet you they skirt the percentage by 8 or 10%. And the other thing is there is something to be said where if you have a first round pick and you're getting that guy that you think is your franchise guy, as the draft goes along, there's more and more imperfections in players. That's just so this year's draft. I like it through 32. Once you get to 45, there's a lot of imperfections. A lot.
Yeah.
That's right. So now you're taking bigger swings no matter what. You just are. And So the teams that take the biggest swings probably do worse and occasionally come up with that Aho or somebody like that comes through in the second round. We all want to remember those guys and say, look, he's a second round. And there's only a few teams. Like San Jose seems to do it more than anybody to come up with these second rounders and sometimes third rounders. But yeah, it's a low percentage. Right?
Well, I mean, the average is 1.8 players per draft that each team gets. So if you look at that, it basically takes you 5 years to get 9 players.
Yeah.
That's the way it looks. Now, the one thing that people are doing, and I've noticed this, and we just talked about Armstrong in Arizona has been doing it, so stockpiling drafts, just because if you have 10 or more picks, like then you can get that 1.8 to 2.1.
Correct.
Now, I mean, it seems ridiculous, but if you can get one extra guy that plays those 200 games over, a 5-year period and get that up to 10 instead of 9 guys.
It's a big difference.
Yeah, it's helpful. So
teams that come up with one and they do that for like 2-3 years in a row, they get killed. Like they're the ones that get killed because then it takes a long time to get those guys. What everybody tries to do now is they go the college free agent route. They go the Euro UFA route, and you try and find gold that way. But those percentages are even lower.
Well,
that's right. I mean, I saw that who was the top NCAA pick this year? Everybody wanted him.
Connor Graf.
Yeah. Graf.
Well, I just saw the Sharks got him, and I just saw a list post Graf signing of the top prospects within the organization. And what do you think Graf fit in that?
Probably
third or fourth behind Will Smith.
What did Russ say?
12.
Yeah. He's below their top 10 prospects.
Yeah.
Well, he was the best. He was the best pick. But the Shang Peng, who did the story, who talks to scouts around the league, did his thing, and he did not crack Shang Peng's.
No, I believe that, and that doesn't mean he can't be a good NHLer. But
not at all.
But that is the way it is. Like that's reality.
And just because we know that more college free agents don't make it than do. That's just reality.
Just as an illustration here before we end the show, this built a dynasty. Okay, Bergeron in 03, Krejci in 04, Lucic in 06, all second-round picks. Marchand third rounder in 06.
But that isn't the point. The point we're trying to make is you're just throwing darts.
Yeah,
like that doesn't happen all the time.
Right.
So
find another team or 3 teams that did it. You can't.
Yeah. And you every once in a while, I mean, just by the randomness of it all, someone's going to do that. So I mean, you got to keep doing it. I mean, the draft's important.
I would say this though too: the teams that are more open to once in a while drafting a smaller guy or once in a while drafting someone from a small school somewhere like a Makar, they're the ones that get paid bigger dividends. Like Braden Point is a great example.
Yeah.
So you got to give Tampa credit for having the guts.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. All right. Great show, guys. We will be back on Monday with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.